Okay, so I think we'll start, everybody. For those of you here, you're very welcome this afternoon. Thanks for joining this attention-based training program, which is week one, hopefully, of 8 consecutive weeks. Each week will roughly be about an hour, so we'll try and intersperse some practice. Normally, I would be sitting in a circle with a group of patients or a number of clients, and we'd be doing this in a very interactive way. But obviously, this is a bit of a bit of an experimental approach to this process. So, for example, just 2 weeks ago, I finished this 8-week program for patients with chronic urticaria in St. James's Hospital. So it's obviously a very different type of presentation when you're in a circle with 10 to 20 patients. But hopefully we'll give it a go. If you have any suggestions about how we might improve the process, please let me know, either via the chat here, which has been recorded, or you can give me an email after the session. So what I hope to do today really is try and give you a brief bit of background on me, on the program itself. We'll do a little bit of practice. And then at the end of each session weekly, I'll be recommending how much practice you should do daily, and a little bit of a recap on what we've just discussed and a discussion on what might be coming up next week. Okay, so before I go into any talk about theory and what attention-based training is, and the ins and outs of things and how we might be expected to practice, I want to start with a brief practice itself. And this is part of the attention-based training program. Anybody who's engaged in mindfulness-based practices would be familiar with this meditation. It's called the body scan. For me, it's one of the most important tools to helping the body and the mind get ready for any type of meditation practice. It's also very useful to calm an agitated mind before you practice, because attention-based training or any type of meditation practice is quite difficult by itself. So you can use the body scan to help calm the mind before you go into the meditation practice itself. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to briefly take you through this. If you can sit back comfortably on whatever chair you're on, it's generally best to keep an upright position for the body scan, because if you're sleepy at all, it can make you nod off and snore a bit. So if we can just maintain an upright position with your feet planted on the ground, and then you can have your hands in your lap or on the arms of your chair or whatever is most comfortable. And then you just close your eyes. So I'm going to gradually take you through this process, which will probably take maybe 3 to 4 minutes. And I want you to get a feel of what these practices are like. And I want to practice what I preach and show you what this is. So again, if you can sit upright in your chair, feet planted on the ground. So I'm going to start the body scan meditation here now. So if you can take a deep breath right down into the toes of your feet, then let it out slowly. So now with your eyes closed, I just want you to bring your attention to the toes on your left foot. So see if you can get a sense of the individual toes of your left foot. It's not always possible to do this. See if you can feel your big toe on your left foot. And now bring your attention to the sole of your left foot. And then your heel. And then into your left ankle. From your left foot, then we go slowly up through your left calf muscle. Each time we reach a muscle group, I want you to sense if the muscle is tight or not. If it is, consciously relax that muscle. So continue to breathe normally as we go through the body scan. Each time you become distracted, just come back to the area of the body that we're focusing on at the time. So from the left calf muscle, then we're going to go up into the left knee. So try and get a sense of the surface temperature of the knee, and then try and get a sense of the internal structure of the knee, your left knee. And then from the left knee, we travel up slowly through the left thigh. We consciously relax the muscle as we slowly move up from the knee towards the left hip. From the left hip, we move across the pelvis and down into the toes of your right foot. So again, try and get a sense of the individual toes on your right foot if you can. It's not always possible. See if you can feel your big toe. And as we continue to breathe normally, get a sense of your whole right foot. So from your toes right up to your ankle. From your ankle, then we move up into the right calf muscle. Again, we consciously relax the muscle if it's tight. From the right calf muscle, then we go into the right knee. And next, we move slowly into the right thigh. And as we move slowly along the thigh, we try to relax all these large muscle groups here. As we move slowly up through the muscle until we reach the right hip. Get a sense of the weight of your body as you sit on the chair at the moment. Feel yourself grounded. So from the pelvis, we move around to the base of the back. From this point, we're going to move up either side of the spinal column. We're going to consciously relax the muscle as we move up either side until we get to the shoulder blades. So try and consciously relax these large muscle groups here at the back. Start slowly from the bottom until we eventually reach the shoulder blades. And then from the shoulder blades, we move up into the large muscles of the left shoulder. These muscle groups often cause a problem when we're tense or anxious. So really try and get a sense if these muscles are tense or not. Consciously relax them. From your left shoulder then, I want you to move slowly down into the tips of the fingers of your left hand, your left thumb. Remember to continue to breathe normally throughout this process. Get a sense of your whole hand, the back of your hand, the palm, the wrist. And then from your left hand, we're going to move slowly up through your left forearm, into your left elbow. And we're going to rest for a moment in your upper left arm. Again, we're going to relax all the large muscle groups here. Get a sense of your whole left arm from the tips of your fingers up to your left shoulder as one unit. And then from your left shoulder, move slowly across to the shoulder, right shoulder, the large muscle groups here on your right shoulder. Again, try to consciously relax these muscles here. Feel them soften. And next, we are going to zip down to the fingers, the tips of the fingers in the right hand, the right thumb. Now bring your attention to your whole right hand. Back of your hand, the palm, the wrist, fingers, the thumb. And then we move slowly up through the right forearm. The right elbow. And we'll rest for a moment on the upper right arm. Again, consciously relax the large muscle groups here. Continue to breathe normally. Get a sense of your whole right arm, the top of the shoulder right down to the fingers. So next, we're going to move to the back of the neck. Feel how the tendons and ligaments connected to your skull, and how your neck is holding up your skull. From the back of the neck, we move around to the jaw. We're going to try and consciously relax the muscles left and right of the jaw. Then we move slowly left and right up your face, past your cheekbones, your temples left and right. Unsmooth your forehead. And then relax the muscles around your eyes. From your eyes, we move around to the back of your head. We move slowly to the top of the head and the scalp. And notice if there's any sensations here in the scalp right now. So before we finish the body scan, I want you to take one long, deep breath. Hold it for a moment. And exhale slowly. So I hope most of you are still awake. That's the body scan meditation. Did anybody find that useful? Because we'll be using this a lot over the coming weeks. Anybody fall asleep with that?
No, we're still here.
Good stuff. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move through a little bit. I'm going to start with a bit of a background on me so you know why I got into this stuff in the first place. And then maybe just a little bit about the evidence base behind this kind of practice. I'm not going to say too long on any research things. I'm not going to bore you with that, but I just want to point you in a direction if you are interested or you can get more info on this kind of thing. Then we'll go to the basic mechanics of the meditative practice itself, which is attention-based training. And then we'll end the session with a short practice. Okay, so a little bit about me. So I'm an immunologist, a PhD, so I've been a researcher for more than 15 years in the UK and Ireland. And then about 10 years ago, I retrained as a psychotherapist because I was interested in really the whole impact of the mind and the body and vice versa. So that led me really to my interest in my current research, which is around the area of psychoneuroimmunology. So probably more importantly than being an immunologist and a psychotherapist is the fact that I'm a patient, as I'm sure all of you have been at some point or probably will be in the future. And I want to briefly just describe why I got interested in meditation in the first place. So when I was 14, I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis. So for those of you who aren't aware of that, this is a progressive disease that affects lots of different parts of the body. It's slightly similar to rheumatoid arthritis, but it affects different areas, such as the eye, for example. And at 14, I wasn't too happy about this diagnosis, which left me in daily pain and continues to leave me in daily pain. So it's a chronic condition. And I'm not telling you that so you can feel sorry for me. I just want you to get an understanding of where I'm coming from and how I got into the meditation practice. So as you might imagine, something like ankylosing spondylitis, which involves daily 24-hour inflammation and pain, leads to a psychological impact, which I didn't really understand when I was younger. You can see from this word cloud here, I put in all the words that would have been emerging from my mind at the time from diagnosis up until relatively recently. So I became quite neurotic. I became very emotional, reactive, quite angry. As I got into my late teens and early 20s, I probably did too much drinking, things like that. My behavior wasn't great. So really, I needed to do something about this. And I noticed that my mental health was impacting on my physical health and vice versa. So I was desperately in my mid to late 20s looking for some kind of solution to this issue. I was on a lot of drugs, but they weren't really cutting the mustard, and the inflammation was still generally there, and the pain was definitely still there. So I did a lot of searching, a lot of different weird and wonderful things. I read a lot because when you're really going through chronic pain, this existential crisis tends to emerge in an individual where you kind of question the futility of life and existence and things like that. And really life becomes very turbulent and traumatic. So one thing that I kept coming up against over and over and over again was the word meditation and all these different books I was reading at the time. Now, for me at the time, and I suppose for lots of people out there still and then, this really was the image of meditation for a lot of people. And to some extent it was for me, that it's a kind of a fuzzy thing about ashrams in India, not really to be taken seriously. But for me, I think I did take it a little bit more serious because I'm a big fan of the Beatles, and I love George Harrison, and I would have read a lot about how especially George Harrison got into meditation. So for me, that was a good role model, so I decided to give it a go. And the result of this intermittent kind of haphazard meditation practice from my mid-20s onward resulted in this strange phenomenon that started to occur. So it wasn't that the meditation practice changed my inflammatory markers in my blood or really kind of changed the actual experience of the pain, but what it did was it turned the volume down on the pain to a tolerable level. And really, at this point, I understood for the first time that there was a link between the mind, the brain, and the body. So I could engage in this very simple practice. And this practice, whereas it didn't change my physical condition, it seemed to change my mental response to it. And to some degree, it engendered some kind of tolerance and acceptance of the practice itself. And this is something I have been interested in for some time. And it seems to me that for a long time, especially during the 20th century particularly, that modern medicine and science has generated this artificial segregation between mental and physical health, which thankfully is beginning to change, especially over the last 10 years. We're now, thankfully, in clinical practice and in research, starting to reintegrate the two, the body and the mind, which is great. So that's a bit about me. That's why I got into this kind of practice. I want to start as well. So you might remember that the My Health series was cancelled a couple of weeks ago for obvious reasons. And during that session, I was going to describe a few myths about meditation. And that's what I want to do with you now. It's what I would normally do when I'm dealing with patient groups or clients as well. And I want to start with one of the first myths, which is meditation is just about your head. It's all in your head. And the reality here is that meditation actually integrates the two primary things in us, which is the mind and the body. And I'm going to show you some research later of how it can have actually significant impacts on both, on the mind and the body. So it's a kind of a bi-directional practice. Another wide sweeping myth is that meditation is all about emptying your head completely of thoughts and emotions and memories and sensations and having this magical, tranquil mind. And this is something I see with patients a lot, that especially patients with chronic diseases, that they're trying to get a baseball bat and whack all these things out of their mind. And the reality is it's not possible to stop thinking. So you're only going to stop thinking when you're dead, unfortunately. So meditation isn't about stopping thinking. It's about disengaging from these activities in the brain that are always going on as a biological process. And that's what I'll describe later in terms of the techniques. Another myth is that you need lots of sorts of fancy bells or a meditation stool or a series of books, for example, or nice smelling candles and cushions to meditate. Now, if you're into that, that's great. If it helps you meditate, super, that's no problem. But the reality is all you need is your head and your breath and your body and the fact that you're alive. So you don't need anything else. You just need to be upright, especially at the beginning, and have your breath. So another myth that's out there is that you have to become some kind of, you have to engage in some kind of retreat process where you have to meditate hours a day to get any benefit. And that's simply not true. So even from research that we would have done in the last couple of years, we were seeing mental and physical changes with people engaging in only 5 minutes a day after 4 weeks. So you can see positive benefits, both mental and physical, even after this short time with this small amount of practice. And then this is another one that some people, not all of people, shy away from meditation because they think it's a Buddhist practice only, and it's not. Meditation in reality has been part of all traditions and cultures for thousands of years, including Christianity. And you can be an atheist, you can be a Hindu, a Christian, anything you want really, and engage in this kind of practice. And it can have many, many different benefits. So it's not, although in many cases it has been a religious and cultural and traditional practice, it doesn't have to be that. So in terms of the proven benefits then, again, I'm not going to bore you to tears with lots and lots of different research papers, but if you type the word meditation or mindfulness, and we'll talk about the differences between the two later in the session, type it into PubMed, the medical, clinical, and research search engine online. What you'll find is an explosion of research papers coming from the year 2000 up until the present. Now, they're not all stellar papers, they're not all fantastic, but there's still a lot of good stuff out there, and it's emerging and it's being added to on a weekly basis. However, it's important to find the good stuff that's out there. And for me, if you're not a scientist, you're not a clinician, this special edition of Scientific Mind is absolutely superb. I think it costs $7 to buy online. It's well worth it. You can buy an electronic version or a physical version. I would really encourage you to buy it. You have a copy of these slides in the folder for this week's session, so you can have that there and access it at your convenience. If you're more into the scientific side of things and you want to really dig deep here, I would really recommend the Current Opinion in Psychology volume from last August. So in this edition, we have 60 papers that goes through many aspects of meditation in a lot of depth, including the neuroscience of meditation. So closer to home, this is research that myself and my colleagues at St. James's Hospital, Trinity College, and the Royal College of Physicians in Ireland conducted a couple of years ago. And it was really in response to a study that RCPI had carried out in 2017, which showed that 1 in 3 Irish doctors were burnt out. So that's a serious stat. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to bring meditation practice into some kind of setting, a clinical setting, a hospital setting, where hopefully you could have some kind of good impact. So thankfully, the good folks in St. James's Hospital and the emergency department here allowed us access to the department and to all staff within this department, so not just medical staff, but nursing and administrative and clerical. We managed to recruit 58 individuals. We conducted a randomized controlled trial. Yes, a third of people in the department were burnt out and some to serious levels. But the long story short is that through 8 weeks of the attention-based training program, we managed to reduce burnout, stress, anxiety. We boosted some immune markers. I'm not going to go into those now, but you can read the paper if you want to find out more. And we improved sleep. So this was a definite success for us, and we were quite happy with that. And if you want to have more information on this, just showing you here, this is a number of papers we published on it in the last couple of years. Okay, so this is an important question, and many of you who are watching this right now or listening in may practice mindfulness meditation, for example, or you may have undergone an 8-week mindfulness course. And a question I get a lot of the time is, well, what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation? Are they all the same? And the short answer to that is actually no. So again, if you're into the science behind this, this is a wonderful project that was done by a German group where they looked at 3 different types of meditation practice. So again, if you're interested in this, you have the slides. You can see the source down there at the bottom, and you can get all the papers this team have produced. So all meditation practices are not the same. And what this group have shown, and what many traditions would have known already, such as Buddhist traditions, that there are a number of different types of meditations. And they all do slightly different things. So if you're looking at meditation practice in terms of a clinical tool, you need to use the right tool for the right job. And these different types of meditation practices do slightly different things. So you can see on the left here what we have are what's called the metacognition type of meditation practices. And these include the mindfulness meditation. And these type of practices are about really observing the internal and external landscapes, including your own psychology and your reaction to these environments. On the top, which is the one that we're going to talk about over this 8-week course, is the attention-based training practice, which is really a focused and concentration type of meditation. And this is quite good for people who have anxious thinking, which is distracting them. It allows a kind of a laser-like focus to emerge. Then the third type of meditation practices are what's called the compassion-based or gratitude-based practices. And these practices particularly are very useful for those suffering burnout, especially healthcare practitioners, where we want to engender an increase in compassion for self and others. So the bottom line is mindfulness is one type of meditation, but there are 3 broad groups of meditation practices, and the one that we're going to focus on is attention-based training. So obviously there's a reason why many of you are here today, and it's not really to hear me talk. It's about this topic here, which obviously is the topic of the decade and maybe the century to come. And it is obviously the COVID-19 crisis. And obviously there's a lot of anxiety around there. There's a lot of anxiety in every house in the country. And this phenomenon and crisis is really taken over the globe. So what we're going to try and do is, and we can use, sorry, I'll just flip back to this slide. We can use attention-based training to tackle this issue head on. And really what happens in something like this is that COVID-19, for example, and everything that's going on around it, creates anxious thoughts. And these anxious thoughts sprout other anxious thoughts and create large narratives where we can spend hours of a day, unbeknownst to ourselves, generating this anxiety and creating all the negative stress hormones that further drive other systems and cause trouble for us in the long term and create anxiety. So the goal of any meditative practice really, as I said, it's not possible really to stop thinking, but what we can do is we can stop the initial thoughts creating a cascade or a domino effect leading to these large narratives which create anxiety. So that's why I like to use the analogy of stopping the first number of dominoes or thoughts from falling so that we don't get a cascade of thinking and a narrative that generates anxiety. And I hope that makes sense to you, because this is the crux of attention-based training and most meditative practices. So that leads us to obviously attention-based training, which hopefully you'll tune in every week and you will engage in this practice on a daily basis. Let's get into the mechanics of what this actually is. And during this process, what I want you to do is I want you to practice this with me at the end of when we describe it so you can get a feel of it. And then I'll be prescribing some daily practice for you for the next 7 days. And each week then we'll add on a different type of meditation and broaden out this practice. Let's look at the mechanics of this. We tend to recommend this kind of posture at the beginning. So it's an upright posture. It's not rigid. You don't have to have a ramrod straight back. But it's important to be upright because meditation, especially if you're tired or anxious or a bit exhausted or overwhelmed, you can get a bit sleepy with this kind of practice. And meditation is not about sleepy time or relaxation. Meditation is work. It's there to serve a purpose. So we recommend this upright position, at least initially. So I would recommend that at least for the first 8 weeks, you try and maintain this posture. The lying down posture can make you sleep, as I said, but after 8 weeks, when you get used to it, you can do it hanging upside down in the tree or on the tube in London. Doesn't matter. But for right now, I would encourage you to use this posture. Your brain and your body will try and sabotage this practice. As soon as you sit down, your mind will go on fire with a number of different thoughts. You'll get an itchy foot, you'll get an itchy knee. Everything will try and sabotage this practice. So we do our best to maintain this posture so that we don't get sore knees and hips. And this is the best posture we can take for the start, which is upright. So when these thoughts come in, like anxious thoughts about COVID-19, we need something to hold on to and return to. And I call this an anchor. So each time a thought comes in, for example, I wonder when this pandemic will ever end. I wonder, will we flatten the curve? I need to stop that first domino falling and initiating a narrative cascade that creates anxiety. And I do this by holding on to an anchor. And we recommend one of 2 anchors. So you can use a chosen phrase. Another name for a chosen phrase would be a mantra in terms of mantra meditation, which is what attention-based training is based on. So you can have a chosen phrase, for example, such as, I am here now. And this phrase can be said in your head. You don't have to say it out loud. But each time a distracting thought comes in about COVID-19, for example, you come back to this phrase, which is, I am here now. And you can play around with this phrase. For example, you can breathe in and say the whole phrase, I am in here now, as you inhale. And then you say the phrase again as you exhale. Or you can break up the phrase. You will need to play around with this a little bit so that it fits with your breathing. But this anchor is very useful and it can be very productive each time you become distracted. The other type of anchor we can use, and the one that I've used from the start of my own personal practice, is the breath. Because the breath is always moving. It's always there. Each time you can become distracted, you come back to your breath. I would recommend you play around for a day or 2 with both of these practices. There is an audio file in your folder that helps you practice both practices to see which one you like best. Once you decide which one you like best, please stick with that one and only use that one for the duration of the 8-week program. So when we become distracted by thinking, emotions, sensations, or memories, we return to this anchor. We do this on a moment-by-moment basis. And in 60 seconds of practice, you might have to do this 100, 200 times, depending on how volatile or turbulent your mind is at that time. So the essence and the mechanics of the basic practice are as follows. You set your timer for 2 minutes. This is the amount of time we're recommending for you to start. Set your timer, assume your upright position, sit on a cushion with your hips above your knees, choose your anchor, be it the chosen phrase, or the breath, and then disengage from thought, emotions, an itchy foot, another anxious thought on a moment-by-moment basis by returning to your anchor. And then once the timer goes off, you're done, and that's your practice finished for the morning or the evening. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. So I just want to very briefly show you this. It's very important to regulate your stress response here. And I'm not going to go too deep into this, but really this is about trying to regulate through the breathing process and using your anchors to calm your cardiovascular system and your autonomic nervous system, which can activate your prefrontal cortex instead of your limbic or your amygdala or your emotional centers. So you can see that when we're stressed and burnt out, sorry, these slides keep jumping on me, that the emotional center is more active than the thinking part of the front part of the brain. And when we engage with these simple practices through the breathing, we tend to calm the cardiovascular system, we calm the autonomic nervous system, which has a positive impact on the brain. And then we decrease the activity in the emotional center, and we increase the activity in the logical center, the prefrontal cortex. So this can only be a good thing when we can learn how to self-regulate ourselves, especially during times of crisis and anxiety. So as I said before at the start of this, and if you joined late, we did a short body scan meditation at the start. The body scan meditation can be very useful prior to engaging in 2-minute practice, especially if you're very agitated, you're very anxious, or you just have a turbulent mind that's returning to a work-related issue, or, for example, a difficult individual. So I would recommend that if it's your time to practice, let's say your 2-minute practice, and you choose your anchor, which is the breath, for example, but your mind is very agitated, I recommend that you engage the body scan first. Now, I've added an audio file and a video file of the body scan in the folder for this week. But hopefully, once you practice this, you will learn to just use the body scan yourself. So you can bring yourself through a 60-minute body scan or a 60-second body scan, whatever you've got time for. But the point here is that the body scan meditation can be very useful to calm the mind before you engage your 2-minute practice. While you practice it during the day, it's useful for tackling a turbulent mind, but it's also quite useful for insomnia. And I know I would have had a lot of patients and clients who would have engaged in this practice to help with the 2 to 4 a.m. waking times, or not being able to get a sleep for a number of hours because of anxious thinking. So this type of meditation puts a spanner in that wheel and stops it cycling. So what I want you to do now is I want you to think about an anchor for a moment. So in your head, think of the chosen phrase. Again, I've given you an example of a chosen phrase or a mantra. You can pick whichever one you want. You can have I like apples, doesn't matter. The one I'm recommending right now is I am here now. So that's one thing you can choose as an anchor, or you can choose the breath. So right now I'm going to go silent, and I'm going to ask you to assume the upright position. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and breathe normally. But before you do, choose the anchor. Again, just to remind you, it's I am here now, or the other anchor is the breath. Whichever one, pick one and use that for the duration of the 2 minutes. So I'm going to set a timer now, and I want you to pick your anchor, and let's start this practice. So that's the end of 2 minutes. I'm hoping that wasn't like an eternity for you. But that's an example of the length of time that I want you to play around with for the coming week. So speaking of the coming week, each week I'm going to give you a practice goal. You will see this in the manual version that you have in your folder. So week 1 is there, and describing the practice again that I've gone through in this presentation. I want you to practice for 2 minutes in the morning and in the evening time. And we'll go through how to develop a habit more in next week. But for the moment, I want you to try, if you can, to pick the same place, the same position, and the same time in the morning and in the evening. And this forms the foundation of good habit generation. So again, your goal this week is 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening, and each day for 7 days until we meet again next Wednesday. These are important points, and I just want to highlight them there. And we'll have a bit of a Q&A session when I'm finished this in the next slide, if that's okay. So I want you to remember that there is data from University College London out there that on average, it takes 66 days to generate a new habit. If you've never engaged in meditation before or anything like this, it's going to take some time for this to embed as a habit. My hope would be that after the 8-week program, that this would be semi-embedded at least, but it will take some more work once those 8 weeks are finished, I would imagine. And this is just an average. So you can actually, if you're more interested in this kind of thing, you can see a link at the bottom that shows you how this number was generated. This is an important thing, the next point here, that a lot of patients will come in if we have our sessions and they'll say, oh, I had terrible practice sessions during the week. I just was distracted all over the place and it was bad, bad, bad. Here's the point. There's no such thing as a good or a bad practice. There's just the practice itself in between that 2 minutes from 0 to 120 seconds. And it doesn't really matter how distracted you are. The analogy I use is that if you went to the gym to build muscle tone, you're not going to build muscle tone lifting feathers. You build muscle tone lifting weights. So this distraction in your mind, whether it's COVID-19, a dog barking outside, or an itchy knee, they should be all welcome into your mind and allowed to remain there. Your job is to disengage and practice that disengagement on a moment-by-moment basis. And you do that by holding on to your anchor, the chosen phrase or the breath. This isn't easy, so I want to acknowledge that from the start. It's quite difficult. It might become easy over time, but it's certainly not easy to begin with, and especially not during a pandemic. It takes time and it takes practice. If I gave you a musical instrument right now to learn how to play that you've never played before, it would take you some time to get good at. This is the same thing. I prefer if you didn't go reading loads of stuff right now on this and just stuck to the program, but I just wanted to flag these books. These are useful books, I think. And maybe at the end of the program, you can dip into these things. Maybe some of you have read them already, but they're quite useful. And most of them are based either on medicine or some kind of research practice. They can be very helpful. But again, if you can, hold on to the very end before you start buying these books. So thank you for patiently listening to the presentation. And I'm going to open up the session for questions now. If most people can turn off their mics if somebody's asking a question so that we've only got one person at a time, that'd be great. If you've any questions at all during the week, there's something you don't understand from the manuals or from the audio files, please send me an email. I'm more than happy to help out and respond, okay? So let's return to the session. So please feel free to ask me a question right now if you want. We've got about 12, 13 minutes left. We don't have to go right to the hour, but if you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer any.
Padraic, it's Barry here.
Hi, Barry.
How's it going? Listen, thank you very much. Firstly, just I think on behalf of us all for, I think it was a very successful pilot. You managed to have, I think, silence and people seemed to be paying attention to what you were doing. I suppose one thing that strikes me, it was the point that you made about the practice piece, because I've done this once or twice before and I've tended to get frustrated where the practice hasn't. I felt like the practice hasn't gone well, and I think the way you described it in terms of a sort of an analogy, if you're going to the gym, something that I also don't do very well as well.
Okay.
Is I mean, that's a really important point I think that you've made, because the tendency is you have to kind of take sometimes 2 steps back to go forward, and you have to kind of be persistent.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Barry. I think it is really important, and I hear it again and again from people. I can tell you right now, I've been doing this practice for at least over 15 years. I try to get a minimum 30 minutes twice a day if I can, and I still have relentless distractions. So the mind doesn't stop humming. Some days are better than others. Some days I get a nice tranquil practice. Sometimes I don't. During this 8-week program, we'll delve a hell of a lot more into how we judge ourselves when we practice, the distractions of practice themselves. I know people, for example, a ticking clock tends to drive somebody crazy with this kind of practice. For me, that ticking clock, the dog barking outside, the child laughing in the next room, they're all your friend. They're there to help you disengage from distraction. And because the nature of this game is, can we remain balanced and resilient in the face of distraction, in the face of turbulence, in the face of a COVID-19 pandemic? So this is hard. There's no such thing as a good or a bad practice. It's just practice. And everybody's in the same boat. If somebody says they aren't in the same boat, I don't think they're telling the truth. So it's something to bear in mind, and it's something that's really important to get to grips with right from the start, because I know a lot of people actually give up because they think, oh, this is not for me. I can't do this. I can't get a tranquil mind. It could take you a long time to get a tranquil mind. You could be lucky and you could get one straight away, but in my experience, it takes a lot of time.
Great, thanks a million.
Problem. Anybody else? Any other questions? Now's your time.
Padraic, it's Katrina here, also from HR. Not a question, but just wanted to very sincerely say thank you for this. I think it's a real gift to the RCSI community to share this with us all at this time when we really need it. So thank you, because I know this, you've lots of other things to be doing, so it really is very much appreciated.
No problem, Katrina. It's my pleasure. Thanks for that. Yeah, and hopefully it'll continue. I mean, this is largely an experiment, I guess, really. As I said, normally this type of session for me would be more interactive, in terms of I'd be surrounded by 10 to 20 people, and as we went through it, we'd be having a chat about the difficulties of this, or maybe the benefits of it. So I'm not sure how many people are out there. I can't see it right now, but hopefully you would have got something from this. I know it's brand new for many people, so it's my pleasure to do this for RCSI. Hopefully it helps. And please do check in during the week with me if you do have any questions during it, because when you start this practice, things might enter your mind that are not entering your mind at the moment. So feel free to ask me. Take the opportunity to go through the folder and all the different bits and bobs on it. And remember, your practice goal for this week is 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening. There's no such thing as a good or bad practice. Just try your best to maintain the 2 minutes morning and evening. If you don't and you miss a day, that's okay. Just get back up on the horse and try it again. And we'll try and do it at the same time next week, if that's okay.
Padraic, just one question here.
Yeah.
I'm just looking here. You may not be able to see the questions, but somebody's just...
oh, sorry, I've seen them now here. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Is the body scan a must prerequisite to the actual meditation practice, was one question that somebody had.
Right. No, absolutely not a prerequisite. So what I'm going to give you is really the central practice itself, which is the attention-based training practice. And we start that with the 2 minutes morning and evening, and we're going to add to that each week by week, until we get to 8 weeks. Now, our target is going to be 20 minutes. Whether you get there or not, that's okay, but that's our target. Around that central practice are a number of satellite meditations that we use like tools for different things, as I mentioned earlier on in the presentation. And one of those satellite practices is the body scan. And for me, I use the body scan for two purposes. If I was in pain, or if I was angry, or if I was upset with something, I find it hard to engage in my 2-minute practice. So I would do the body scan before that, generally only then. If I had an aching knee, for example, I would do the body scan to try and help tolerate and soften that pain. If I had difficult sleeping, I would use the body scan there. So it's not a prerequisite, it's a satellite meditation around that, if that makes sense. So sorry, I didn't see your chat questions at the side. I have them all up here now. I'm just going to go through them here.
Lots of thank yous. I'm just seeing here, Padraic, there's a somebody's, because our Bahrain, I think we've Bahrain colleagues that are on the line.
Great.
Which is fantastic. And I just see one, I think it's Anita in Bahrain, saying there's 80 people on the line from Bahrain.
Right, that's super.
In addition to the 56. So there you go. Wow. You're a popular man.
That's fantastic, yeah. And great. I hope everybody is doing okay in Bahrain. Thank you very much for tuning in. And again, likewise, check in with me during the week if you have any issues with the practice, and check in again next week.